The funeral of Sam Whitaker took place on a grey, chilly morning in Willow Creek. Jake Whitaker, his nephew, stood near the back, observing the scene with a stoic expression. It was a large gathering, a testament to Sam's popularity in town. Sam had been the proud owner of Whitaker's General Store, where locals not only bought groceries, but also caught up on the latest town gossip. The store was Sam's kingdom, and the townsfolk came to pay their respects to the man who, in their eyes, had been a pillar of the community. But as the service continued, an odd tension rippled through the crowd. Buck, Sam's loyal, elderly dog, began barking at the closed coffin, his eyes fixed on it with unsettling intensity. The barking broke through the solemn silence, jolting everyone out of their mourning. Buck's ears lay flat, his tail rigid, each bark rattling the somber atmosphere. Jake frowned. Buck's reaction wasn't typical for a dog simply distressed by loss. There was something raw, almost frantic in the way he barked, an urgency that was hard to ignore. Jake's gaze shifted to Reverend Carter, a man known for his calm demeanor who had known Sam for years. Standing behind the pulpit, Carter looked flustered, casting nervous glances toward the coffin. The reaction from Reverend Carter didn't sit right with Jake. Deciding to approach him after the service, he kept a close watch on both Buck and the Reverend. The funeral proceeded, but the barking continued, adding to the tense atmosphere. As people lined up to pay their last respects, Jake caught the Reverend near the altar. Reverend Carter was offering condolences, but Jake managed to pull him aside. "Reverend Carter," Jake began, his voice edged with curiosity. "Do you have any idea why Buck's reacting like this? I mean, it's strange, isn't it?" Reverend Carter paled slightly, adjusting his collar. "Dogs, well, they sometimes sense things we can't," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "Perhaps Buck is just unsettled by the crowd." Jake noticed the tremor in the Reverend's voice, an unusual reaction from a man known for his composure. This wasn't the confident Reverend Carter who spoke every Sunday. His hands shook as he clasped them, and his eyes avoided Jake's. This nervousness fueled Jake's curiosity further. Buck's barking felt like a message, and Reverend Carter's reluctance only deepened his suspicions. "Right. Maybe," Jake replied, his voice casual but his mind anything but. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Buck's barks, the Reverend's unease, it all pointed to a picture he couldn't yet see. As Reverend Carter stepped away, Jake's mind raced through memories of his uncle, searching for anything that hinted at secrets buried. As the mourners dispersed, Jake approached the coffin, where Buck had finally settled, sitting by its side, his head resting against the wood. The old dog's eyes held an emotion Jake couldn't name, mirroring the hollow confusion he felt himself. Jake spent the rest of the day replaying the events of the funeral in his mind. Buck's barking, the Reverend's nervousness, and the atmosphere at the church left an uneasy feeling in his chest. Sam had always been a straightforward man, or so Jake believed. The memory of his uncle felt tinged now with something darker. Determined to find answers, Jake returned to Whitaker's General Store later that evening. The store had been untouched since Sam's passing, and Jake felt an odd sense of unease as he entered. The familiar shelves, stocked with local produce and essentials, seemed to hold a weight they hadn't before. In the back, past the shelves and counter, was Sam's modest office, a cluttered room where he'd kept records, supplies, and all the small parts of running his business. Jake had rarely entered the office, but tonight he felt compelled. As he opened drawers and flipped through old receipts, Jake's fingers stumbled upon a small bundle of letters tied together with a faded red ribbon. Curious, he unfolded the top letter and found the handwriting unmistakably Sam's. The letter was dated decades ago, and it was addressed to none other than Reverend Carter. The letter spoke vaguely of an agreement and a promise that needed keeping. Each word seemed to carry the weight of a decision made in secrecy. "I know it wasn't right," Sam had written, but sometimes doing what's necessary isn't clean or easy. Jake felt a shiver run down his spine. What had his uncle done? And why did it involve the Reverend? Digging deeper, Jake found more letters, each one more ambiguous yet laced with an undertone of regret. There were phrases that hinted at guilt and fear, words that seemed to beg for understanding. "I never wanted anyone to find out," one letter read. Jake's curiosity shifted to unease. This wasn't the straightforward man he had known. Determined to understand, Jake took the letters with him. As he locked up the store, his mind was racing with questions. He needed answers, but he also felt the weight of the secret he was now beginning to uncover. Back home, he spent hours poring over the letters, trying to decipher the vague language and piece together the nature of the secret. In the early hours of the morning, Jake's thoughts drifted to Reverend Carter. The man had clearly been involved in whatever Sam had done. If anyone could provide clarity, it would be him. But would he even tell Jake the truth? The weight of the letters pressed on Jake's mind, leaving him with the feeling that whatever his uncle had hidden, it was far from simple. And as dawn approached, he knew he was getting closer to uncovering the real Sam Whitaker, whether he wanted to or not. The following day, Jake decided it was time to confront Reverend Carter. With the letters tucked into his coat pocket, he made his way to the Reverend's home, a modest cottage on the outskirts of Willow Creek. The morning fog hung thickly, casting a somber tone over his walk. As he approached the front steps, Jake took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his uncle's words pressing down on him. Reverend Carter opened the door, his face weary, as if he'd been expecting this visit. "Jake," he greeted, voice resigned. His eyes held sadness, but he stepped aside, allowing Jake to enter. Inside, the cottage was warm, but filled with an uneasy stillness. Jake wasted no time. He pulled out the bundle of letters tied with the faded ribbon and placed them on the table. "I found these in Sam's office," Jake said, steady, watching Carter's reaction closely. The Reverend's face tightened, and he looked away, his gaze drifting toward the window, lost in thought. "Sam and we were bound by a secret," Carter began quietly. "Something happened years ago, something we swore never to reveal. And now that burden has fallen to you." He sighed, rubbing his forehead, lines deepening with strain. As Carter explained, Jake's chest tightened. Years ago, Sam had witnessed a tragic accident involving a powerful figure in town, someone whose family still held sway over Willow Creek. To protect those involved, Sam and Carter had kept it hidden. But the memory haunted Sam. He'd never been able to shake it. "It ate away at him," Carter admitted, remorseful. Sam tried to make peace with it, but he felt like a fraud, even though everyone loved him. The weight of that night stayed with him. "He wanted to," Carter replied, "but he feared what it would do to everyone. He thought silence was his sacrifice." At the cemetery, Jake found Buck lying by Sam's headstone, the old dog's eyes reflecting loyalty. Jake knelt beside him, resting a hand on his head. "We'll carry his memory, Buck," he murmured. "The real Sam." He knew the burden of truth would remain in his heart, a reminder of the complex legacy Sam left behind. But now, Jake understood that even with flaws, Sam's life held integrity, a silent sacrifice made for those he loved. And as Jake rose, he carried forward with Buck at his side, ready to preserve the memory of the man who had chosen family over reputation and truth over ease.